All right, being the 8:16, we'll call the meeting to order. Roll call, Mr. Kaminsky.
Present.
Mr. Reiner.
Here.
Mr. Sager.
Here.
Mr. Scala.
Present.
Ms. Van Bergen.
Here.
And I'm here. Do I have a motion to allow Mr. Kunkel to join?
Motion.
Mr. Reiner moves, Van Bergen seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Move down to minute approval. Is there a motion? Mr. Scala moves, Mr. Kaminsky seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public comment. Do we have some public comment?
Nope, nobody signed up.
Member comment? Brian?
One of the things I just wanted to bring forward and see if there's something we could do, but we had a meeting, some of us with the Farm Bureau Board, and was hoping that perhaps we might be able to move something forward relatively quickly. And that has to do with the harvest time, if you will, of the seasonal weight limits. And so I'm hoping that we might be able to take a look at some of those things. And I know that there was a state new adjustment, I guess, made in policies or law. And I think we have to take that in accommodation that allows that to be more of a permanent type of thing on a seasonal basis. So just wanted to raise that and see where we might be.
Right, so that was a state is the permanent one.
Right.
And then we always did one seasonal.
Also.
I gotta admit, my mistake. I brain cramped that and didn't put that on the agenda for us. I was wondering if you could throw it on your agenda possibly, just so we get it in the meeting for October.
Yeah, it's nothing financial, but
It has nothing to do with it, but as kind of an emergency. Or we can do a new unfinished business.
Lots of revenue on the agenda.
yeah,
Under,
fine last year's.
We're not finished.
Right, we've done this resolution before.
Yeah, it's almost every year that the county votes on it.
Yeah, it's whenever the Farm Bureau brings it up.
but on the county, on the,
Last time-
we'd have to be on the county board, we couldn't do it today, though.
No, we don't have anything there.
But we can do it on the county board meeting, though.
That's perfect if everybody's good with that.
Oh, yes.
The chairman will be good with that.
That's what we
It's
need
an
to
annual
do.
thing.
Okay, down to the routine consent agenda. Anyone like to pull any items off? None? Okay. I'm not gonna pull 5.3, but I'd like to point out that's one that we could use as an example down the road for new business for the 6.2C. No, I don't wanna pull it now, but we could use that as an example though.
I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items 5.1 through 5.8.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Scala, second by Mr. Sager. So roll call. Any discussion any further? No. Let's go to roll call. Mr. Reiner,
Yes.
Mr. Sager,
Yes.
Mr. Scala,
Yes.
Ms. Van Bergen,
Yes.
Mr. Kaminsky.
Yes.
Mr. Kunkel, how would you like to vote?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. New business, staff recognition. Well, we're moving right along today.
Come on, Sam. All right, so I have the pleasure to announce our Employee of the Quarter for the third quarter of 2023, Samantha Pearson. Sam was nominated by her employees, by her coworkers for this award. She started with the DOT in March of 2021 in the middle of the pandemic. Not only does Sam provide vital accounting assistance for the finance section, but she is also the first point of contact for residents when they call or visit the DOT. Regardless of what the resident's issue is, Sam makes a point to listen patiently and then goes out of her way to help or direct the resident to the right person. MCDOT has received numerous compliments over the years thanking Sam for helping when nobody else would. Within the department, Sam has grown a reputation for being a kind, dependable, and positive coworker and friend. She personifies the county's organizational values of integrity, accountability, and respect. Among her duties, Sam assists our maintenance section with all their financial obligations. This ranges from processing their daily invoices to assisting with shifting the funds around when unexpected emergencies occur. She also coordinates all of DOT's monthly reimbursement requests to IDOT, which can range in the several millions of dollars that she administers. Sam is an important part of the DOT team, and therefore we are proud to announce her as the employee of the quarter.
Isn't it fun standing up front of everyone?
Congratulations.
Yeah,
We
thank
do
you.
that.
All right, presentations. The PACE Rideshare Access Program.
So Jasmine Vega is going to help me out with this one. Again, Jasmine helps coordinate our transit programs here at the DOT. So she's going to kind of first talk about we're going to get into the rideshare thing second, but first we're going to talk a little bit about PTAC and some of the discussion there. So take it away, Jasmine.
Okay, good morning. So we wanted to bring a summary of the previous PTAC meeting that was held back in August. We do have a couple of PTAC committee members here this morning.
Wave your hands, PTAC members. Thank you.
Who can answer any questions or offer any input if needed. So we had a lengthy discussion about the current MC Ride fare structure. Just as some background, MC Ride's last fare increase was in January of 2019, where fares increased from $2.50 to $3 for the general public and $1.25 to $1.50 for seniors or individuals with a disability. The 25-cent surcharge per mile has remained in place since 2012. After providing this information to the committee, we also took a look at other regional dial ride and paratransit services, took a look at their fare structures, and some of their program parameters as well. After this discussion, PTAC was in full agreement of a fare increase and requested that we bring this opinion to you all, have some discussion about it, and potentially get some next steps from you all. So we don't have a solid dollar amount that we would necessarily like to increase. We do have some ideas. We can throw that out to you all. But we are in a bit of we do have some obligation to PACE to provide that fair amount to them so that they can further develop and put together an agreement for 2024 operation services. I'd like to open it up to you all about the potential of fare increase for MC Ride for 2024.
And the timing is important because Jasmine's right now coordinating with PACE on the annual IGA that we have with PACE, which lays out things like the fare structure. So we would need to know within the next month, hence the reason we're bringing it here today.
So Scott, if in our discussion, we would bring an agenda item forward next month, is that enough time?
I don't think we need an agenda item for this.
Just need
I think if the committee is supportive of raising the fare on MC Ride next year in 2024, Jasmine could work with PACE to incorporate that into the IGA.
And you'll come up with the dollar amount yourselves.
Yeah, we threw around the idea of raising the base fare, which is currently at $3 to $4, and then our reduced rate for seniors and individuals with a disability right now is at $1.50. It was proposed for an increase of 50 cents, making that $2 a trip.
Okay, any other discussion, guys?
Well, you said senior citizens with a disability?
It's and or.
Oh, okay, senior citizen or somebody with a disability. I'm reading the memorandum here and it says $5 base fare rider for.
And John, the memo is separate, so that's a different program.
Okay, that's so totally different than what we're just, okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that, that was a little.
So right now, all we're talking about is the MC Ride program that has the PACE buses that we use. We're talking about that program.
How much of those rides are subsidized?
At the current moment, each trip is subsidized 94% by the taxpayers.
94%?
Correct.
Wow.
So we've had, since we started this program over a decade ago, we had a de facto goal of a fare box recovery of 10%, meaning the rider pays 10% of the cost, taxpayers pay 90%. Since, and actually in 2019, when Jasmine mentioned the last time we raised our fare, our fare box recovery was 11% in 2019. Since that time, it's dropped to about 6% today, from 11 to 6% in a matter of 3-4 years. And the reason for that is because our costs have basically doubled in that time. Our ridership has remained roughly the same, but our costs have doubled. And so that's why PTAC was supportive of looking to get a little bit more from the riders next year, because again, we have this goal of a 10%, we're only at 6. So.
Just a question, we're gonna go for a typical standard rider from $3 to $4?
Yes, for the base fare.
So what would that mean for that rider? Have we taken any questions on those? Would they be able to still, would that prohibit them from getting home from work? I mean, because look at what we're saving, right? In the scheme of things, we're paying 94%. If we paid 93%, does it matter to us as much as it matters to them? Would it mean something to them? Because that's 4 one way, right?
Right.
So that's $8 from 6. $30 to $40 a week. Does it mean, have we questioned the riders? I mean, would it?
So our riders are the neediest people in our community. These are typically low-income individuals who also have a disability, some of them, or they're at an age where they cannot drive anymore, then they're on fixed income. So yeah, John, we've not surveyed our riders lately, asking them what this would mean to them, but it was going to have an impact on them financially.
We're coming into one of the hardest years next year and the year after with looming recession. I don't know, is this necessary, you guys?
But where are they gonna pick up the money? If you don't do it on this end, you're gonna do it on the back end, which means the taxpayer's gonna have
too, Carl, you know, I mean, I don't know.
you're gonna raise it on the property taxes to make up the difference. So they're gonna get hit again.
Are we though? Isn't that coming from PACE?
This program is funded by PACE and by sales taxes,
RTA.
the county sales taxes.
Right, and most of that is,
User fee.
right?
Still gonna have to make up the difference.
So again, we're only proposing this because of the county's goal, and if the goal is changed, if we no longer want to
I know.
seek a 10%
Yeah.
fare box recovery, that's fine. But again, staff are just responding to previous county board's direction to seek a
Yeah.
10% fare box
All
recovery.
right, let's get somebody else in for questions. Tracy, did you have something? You look like you wanted to say something.
Well, I guess I feel along the same lines as Mr. Reiner here, that, you know, this is the most vulnerable part of our population who are seeing increases, you know, everywhere they turn around for just basic living needs. Is there a way?
Okay. Is there another way, another avenue?
Yeah.
Mr. Sager?
Well, I think the question about levels of fare box recovery are always going to be out there, but they've been out there more recently, even at the state level, I think, with regards to trying to reduce the reliance upon the fare box recovery for transit overall. I guess for that reason, and I kind of agree with it, so I guess for that reason, I would want to stick with my kind of overall philosophy and policy approach that I don't think that the purpose of a PACE program is to really get the money so much from the passengers as to provide for those who are in need. And so I guess I'm a little bit hesitant to do that. And I think that that's becoming more of a state emphasis as well. I mean, we've had a rate of 50% fare box recovery for other transit systems overall, and the state legislature is considering right now reducing that ratio of recovery just for these very reasons.
So you're kind of in agreement with?
I am.
Okay. Mr. Scally, you're.
The only question that I would have is quantifiably, what does that mean? I mean, what is raising $1? Does that produce $10,000 more a year? Does that produce $100,000 more a year? I don't.
65 to 75,000 is what I came up with in additional funds.
That sounds about
on
right.
both sides of the equation? And what you didn't mention was anything about the 25 cents a mile. Was that considered to stay the same, or?
It was considered, the committee, their opinion was to raise the base fare and keep the additional surcharge as is.
But we did talk about the 25-cent increment as well, and they ultimately said they didn't want to touch that.
You know, with the cliff coming forward, does not, just leaving it status quo, does that jeopardize the MC Ride program in the future?
That's a more of an opinion, I think, than something I can say with certainty. I will say that fiscal cliff, and I'm speculating here, but it's been talked about, that's going, region-wide, we're gonna be seeing fare increases over the next 5 years. Like, there's no way around that. Fares need to go up. We're lucky here in McHenry County that we can set our own fare for our own program. So we don't have to follow what the rest of the region is doing. But just know that in the broader context of transit, fares are gonna go up region-wide on CTA, Metro, and PACE. I'm not opposed to anything that was said here. We can leave it as is if that's the committee's direction. But just know that there's gonna be pressures elsewhere to increase fares.
There is a scenario, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, where we do perhaps lose a little control on fares for the dial-a-ride services if in fact we get a more regional approach to dial-a-ride.
Yeah, that's true.
One of the angles that we're hoping to proceed to realize is that the border between McHenry and Kane and the border between Lake and McHenry isn't a border in 3 years.
Right.
It stands to reason that if that happens, we do lose a little control on the fares.
And I will note on that point, Jasmine said we looked at the other programs. So Kane County's base fare is $5. Lake County, we didn't include, but I believe it's higher than $3, what we have today. So both of our neighbors are higher than we are. Again, doesn't mean they're right and we're wrong. It's just a different philosophy that we
I have one thought, Mr. Chair, if I could just.
I want to ask Pete one question first. Explain to me this 3 years orders.
Well, 3 years,
I-
3 years is an arbitrary number, but I mean, we know the system has to be fixed in 2 years, right? Basically, we got 27 months to fix whatever. So one of the arguments that we've been making with the Collier counties is if we're going to be asked to put in more money, you know, some way, shape, or form, we are expecting some increased services. One of those increased services would be a more regional dial-a-ride where you can take the dial-a-ride from Huntley to central Kane County, or you can take the dial-a-ride from McHenry to Antioch. You can't do that now.
Mr. Sager.
And I agree, absolutely. The issue really is that the McRide program is a special set of program funds that's coming out, a special set of funds. I personally don't believe that those funds are going to be reduced on the basis of the fiscal cliff in transit right now. I think that there's enough of a mindset in the RTA board and others that those are necessary program funds, if you will. And I don't think that that's going to occur. I think that they will continue to be supported at an increasing level. But there are all kinds of ways that the legislature and others, CMAP as well as RTA, are looking at trying to increase fund availability to deal with this fiscal cliff. And it's going to have to be a combination of a lot of those different types of things. As we've already heard, RTA board is looking at 18 different options, and others have kind of narrowed this down. CMAP is coming up with their report. And as we look at those types of things, it's going to have to be a broad combination of that. But I think there's enough of a separation, frankly, between these special program funds under which McBride falls, that I don't think that those funds are going to be necessarily jeopardized. We have to kind of consider the wheelbarrows of money. Yeah, I mean, it's all the money. The money's the money, but it's still different wheelbarrows where it comes from, different pots of money.
Okay. You know, Mr. Kunkel, do you want any input on this one? I almost forgot about you.
Yeah, my thoughts on it, obviously inflation hits this demographic the hardest. It would seem to me this is a poor time to be changing the program. I would be in favor of just holding the status quo for at least this next coming year.
I have one other suggestion.
Mr. Reiner?
Mr. Kunkel, I agree with you, but you know, one thing I thought of, if we are, you know, jeopardizing, you know, or hurting the funds too much, would it be acceptable to consider leaving grandma and the physically handicapped alone, leave those fair alone, and then leave the people that actually do have jobs that are using it, leave that rate? What, you didn't mention the physically handicapped or the senior citizens in Kane County. What are they charged?
So in Kane County, they only serve senior citizens and people with disabilities.
Really? And they're paying $5?
That's how the entire region, we're the only county, correct me if I'm wrong, Jasmine, but we're the only program that serves everyone that wants a ride. Every other program in the entire Chicagoland region is just for the senior or disabled demographic. And their programs are structured very different than ours. In Kane County, they have to have a sponsor. So for example, that'd be like if Pioneer Center said, we will pay for all of our clients to get trips. And if you're not a Pioneer client, you can't ride their program. That's kind of how Kane County is structured. You need to have an agency that basically sponsors you. Whereas our program, any of us could call up Pace today and say, I want to ride tomorrow. If we need that type of service, we can get it. We don't need a sponsor, we don't need to be a certain age or disability status, anybody can ride. So it's different down there, but they are $5 for seniors and disabled each way.
Can groups still buy passes to give to?
Yes, we still sell those.
You still sell those? Okay. Anything else?
Well, the only thing I was gonna say is I appreciate what other members have commented on. I kind of feel like the problem is that the apple continues to get bigger and bigger to try and bite off. And so perhaps we should look at trying to do something, you know, on a COLA basis or whatever that will index up with individuals versus just trying to take 25 cents or 50 cents, you know, every 5 or 6 years. We've had the discussion about other financial issues that come up on the county, and I mean, Brian, I think you've said it numerous times, you know, like, can't we index this year over year versus trying to take a big bite each time? And, you know, I agree with, you know, to me, the differentiation between perhaps those that have jobs that just, you know, perhaps don't have a driver's license or whatever versus those that are, I would say, more vulnerable in our society. And to me, I could draw a differentiation between those two also.
Okay. You've been pretty quiet. I know you wanted to talk, but
I'm good with his suggestion. Makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, if you're working and you're going out to, you know, earn a living, that's, like he says, you don't have a license or a car, that's in this bucket. The disabled veteran,
Vulnerable,
indigent person that ain't got an income, you don't want to penalize them.
okay, so we got three of you going that way. You'd go that way?
I could go with a COLA index.
is that doable?
Could we peg the fare structure to a cost of living adjustment year over year? Yeah, we could do that. I mean, and again, that's what the 10% fare box recovery was meant to do, was if our costs go up, our fare goes up the same way. It's just that with the pandemic, there was when ridership was cut in half, there was a reluctance to raise fares on the remaining 50%, and that's why we haven't touched it since 2019. But if you look back before 2019, we raised fares on a pretty regular basis, if not every year, every other year, we'd be raising fares. That was just a common thing we did. So again, it's not a right or wrong way to do this. It's just more personal preference. That's why we brought it in front of you today.
Appreciate that you did.
Scott, the question, can PACE separate that when the call comes in between those that can and can't pay, i.e. the vulnerable that's being suggested too?
The senior fare and
Yeah.
disability.
So how it-
Well, they're
how it-
If
separated
they get the
now.
discount, they have to be
Yeah,
separated.
so right now,
Right.
how our program works is you have to register for our program. So you call up, you give them your information, they register you, and they classify you in one of these three categories. Either you're disabled, you're a senior, or you're the general public, we call them. And so when you're registered as that individual, the next time you call and you reserve a ride, they know what fare what fare structure to offer you. You know, they say, oh, you're general public, yours will be $3. So you're just in the system that way. I hesitate, to just touch the general public fare because our program, and this is getting in the weeds, but our program is self-reported. Somebody calls up and says, my birthday is on this date, therefore I'm a senior. We don't check their documentation. We don't check their driver's license when you get on the bus. We don't check that they're disabled. Like, we just take their word for it that they have a disability, right? So the more that gap between the general public fare and the senior disabled fare increases, the more I get concerned that people may stretch the truth about their status because it's a huge difference. If I say I'm a senior, even though I'm 59, I'm gonna get a $3 discount now, or whatever the number is. That's a big incentive. Right now, it's $1.50, so I don't think that's really happening that much. But if it grows, I get concerned about people's self-reporting of their information.
Scott, all of us, no matter where we go around here, you gotta give up an ID that they make a photocopy, be it the VA downstairs or up here, HR. Couldn't that be incorporated where you have a bona fide that they are that person at that address, at that age? I mean,
And we'll get into this with the next program. That is something Jasmine and I are gonna be phasing in over the next year. We're going to start requiring people to show an ID. If they claim they're a senior or they claim they have a disability, we wanna make sure that they prove that. And we've been doing self-reported for over a decade and it's worked just fine. I don't wanna create alarms or anything. It's working just fine.
I think you got a potential.
I agree, Carl. It's something that everybody else is just used to now. Everybody has an ID, so it's something we're gonna start doing in the future.
Mr. Sager,
What would be the opportunity just to consider a 50-cent increase here? 50 cent from $1.50 to $2, and 50 cent from $3 to $3.50.
We would know that. You know what scares me? That COLA can mean a raise of $2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost a cure for what you wait for.
I do absolutely, I need to go back to some of my foundations too that says, we do need to make incremental increases. I think that's important. So, 50 cents, I think maybe at the fare box might be acceptable for most people. That's, if it's a round trip, then that's $1, basically.
This was discussed at PTAC. Their request by a full dollar was more of some of our users having to carry change. So their request was to a full dollar. It is a bit of a concern, and we do receive quite a bit of complaints about the exchanging of coins on the bus. So it wasn't just like an arbitrary amount, but at the request and desire of PTAC to do that by the full dollar amount.
That was a big deal for the PTAC committee because, again, the driver doesn't make change for you. So if your fare is $1.50 and you don't have 50 cents, you're given $2. That's your fare. And it's not like
I thought there was cards that.
there are, but 99% of trips are not paid for with those cards. They're paid for in cash. And at this point, our program is cash only. Because PACE has not implemented any type of electronic payment system on our program. And so PTAC, again, wants to get away from any kind of change. They want to get to $1. That's why the 2.4 was so attractive, because then people don't have to carry change.
Is it that much of a cost to have like your gift cards. They just swipe it, that's what it is, you have your balance.
Or
I mean, I don't know what
We would love that. We've been asking Pace for that for 10 years. Pace has told us no for 10 years. So it's something that, again, we're in the situation not because we want to be, but because Pace won't change the system for us.
Okay, Brian.
The question is going to be, which is going to be most challenging, for the rider? The inconvenience of not having cash and being penalized for that, not having the coins, or just the increase in fare? And it sounds like P-TEC is saying to us, go with the increase.
So you changed your mind?
Because, yeah, I guess I am changing my mind,
Okay.
and
So we have a discussion.
I think that the fact is that right now, if they're at $1.50 and they're complaining because they don't get the change back and they're ending up having paid $2 anyway, that's the reality of their fare, right?
Okay,
Are you okay with any of the P-TEC members commenting so that they could be part of the discussion? I mean, in essence, we're having a discussion.
I have no problem with
It's
that.
gotta be torturing them.
Then come on up.
No, so just let me preface my comment with that I was not.
You have to introduce
Introduce
yourself.
yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Sarah Schrempf. I'm the vice chair of P-TEC chair. But I read minutes and all that stuff. But anyway, I guess I want to point out that since the last P-TEC meeting, the county did approve an increase of fuel tax. Am I not wrong on that? Almost double on the percent.
Not me, but the.
Okay, but
Oh,
I guess.
John, I didn't recognize you.
If I were sitting in P-TEC meeting right now, this is absolutely something I probably would have brought up, that if the general public throughout McHenry County is going to incur a fuel tax increase, if these folks were driving, they too would incur the same fuel tax if they were driving. So to potentially increase the fare, the base fare, I think is reasonable. So it's information that I got since the last meeting, and I can't speak on behalf of all of P-TEC, but being on the P-TEC committee and also being a resident of the county, I just wanted to put that out there for your consideration.
Thank you. So now we know that Brian switched his mind back to the increase.
Mr. Kearns,
Yes.
they say that you can't have like a gift card type of thing. Isn't there a way that they can be invoiced each month that you've used and you gotta pay?
Now we're bill collecting and everything. We don't want to get into
Okay,
that.
I'm just asking,
And I just,
around the
you
coin
take something
issue.
and you complicate it even more. Now you've added on the expenses of accounting and billing, receivables, and that's just not gonna work. I don't believe, but I think that would come down from the uppers on that. Anybody else?
I'm kind
Any
of
more
going
thoughts
for
on
the
this?
dollar increase, only because I think if we went with a COLA, it'd be much higher.
Okay, so there we have two. John, what were you on the increase?
Kind of leave the disabled and seniors, at what they are, and then the guy that doesn't have a license or a car that has to use it, that I'm okay with $1 up.
Okay, now we split the baby on us.
I'd be over with it.
Yeah, that's fine.
So now we're on the dollar, going up the dollar.
Well,
Mr. Kunkel, I didn't ask your opinion.
On the general public.
I've always been in favor of the even money, but more than that, we touched on this in transportation in the very beginning. The fact that we beg and beg Pace for increased efficiencies, especially electronic efficiencies, and the whole world is doing this. And for some reason, they can't do it, and yet they're gleaning all this cash basis, which is hard to quantify. But I am for the increase to round the dollar point so it's even money for the fares. I can see where that handling alone is an efficiency. But again, I would implore Pace that we get moving on something that's more efficient on their end too for these fees altogether.
All right, so I understand this, you're all for the full dollar for the non-senior
Or
and
handicap.
disabled, and the 50 cents would make them an even dollar on the seniors.
So $2 and $4.
Yes.
Okay,
Quick question. Do we offer a discount for these rider cards?
So, yeah, the rider, so when you pay in cash, it's distance-based. So you pay the base fare plus a 25-cent per mile fare for every mile over 5. So your fare could vary from $2 up to $10, depending on how far you're going. When you buy a card from the DOT, the fare cards, it's $3 a card. Doesn't matter how far you go, because we don't know that when you purchase these cards. We don't know how far your trips are gonna be in the future. So we had to, again, we started selling them at $3 back in 2015, I think, back when our fare was much lower. So we were charging more for these fare cards because it was a convenience for people. So we said, you're paying for the convenience of using a card. Since then, our fare has gone up, but the cards have stayed at $3. So that's something we're also gonna look at too, is do we need to raise the cost of those cards?
we should, and how many do we sell of those?
Jasmine, how many cards do we sell?
It depends, but I would say about 4,000 a year. With probably about 1,500 of those, I could think of a separate, just one organization who purchases 1,500, so.
And keep in mind, we give about 100,000 rides a year. So we sell.
So I remember, we used to purchase them from food pantry at the townships, we patch and give them out to food pantry people.
So they're less than 5% of our total riders.
Is it convenient for people to purchase these cards?
I wouldn't say, I don't think so, because they have to come all the way out to our DOT headquarters out on Nelson. And it's not, we don't make it convenient because it's not necessarily something we want to increase our administrative burden as staff. We're making this available for people that want it. And some people are using it, some people choose not to.
Pace has got to get on board with their electronic payments.
Okay, let's,
We're done.
we're getting bogged down here a little bit. I think you've got your directive there.
And that was the tough part. This is the fun part. Now Jasmine's going to talk about the thing that's in your packet, the rideshare memo. That's
Thank you.
Thank you. So on August 16th, the PACE Board approved the Rideshare Access Program, which is similar to the Taxi Access Program in Chicago. That program allows ADA paratransit users to utilize a subsidy for eligible rides on TNCs, which are rideshare companies. McHenry County has expressed an interest in implementing a program like that. And since August, MCDOT has had initial conversations about potential program parameters of a program like that here in the county. Those proposed program parameters are in the handout that you have in your packet. And all of these proposed parameters are subject to change just based off of any discussion that we have this morning. I'll go through them, and Scott has provided a couple of examples that kind of will give some visualization of what that could look like in practice. So the first part of this would be eligibility. We would require riders to have a permit card that is reviewed and approved by RTA, a senior who is over the age of 65, an individual with a disability, and they must be a McHenry County resident. The second eligibility is the fare and public subsidy. So we would request a $5 base fare from the rider side, and the subsidy, which would be on the county's end of that, would be $20. The rider would be responsible for anything over $25. Trip capacity, so the rider would be limited to 8 trips per day per provider, and they may utilize multiple providers if available. The service area, one At least one leg of every trip should be in McHenry County, but it would also allow for trips to locations outside of McHenry County. I'll let Scott kind of go over the examples and some of the considerations.
So again, just to take a step backwards, so this is, the idea is PACE is going to contract with TNC, like Uber, Lyft, or some other TNC that maybe you haven't heard of before that are operating in McHenry County today. They're gonna contract with that TNC. PACE is then gonna make, and they're already they're starting that process for ADA paratransit riders, people that have a disability, they live and wanna travel within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route. So PACE is gonna pay for those ADA paratransit rides 100%. They're gonna say, if you wanna travel on Uber, instead of a bus picking you up, we'll pay for that Uber ride for ADA paratransit riders. They asked us if we wanna make this available to the wider audience of people beyond just ADA paratransit riders. The number of ADA paratransit riders in McHenry County are probably less than 100, just so everybody fully understands that. 100 individuals. And the reason for that is because we don't have fixed route. So no one goes through the process of becoming ADA certified because there's no fixed route to even make you eligible for ADA. So we said, this is something we're interested in. We want to make it only for seniors or people with disabilities. So not general public. Unlike MC Ride, this is going to be just for that unique rider group. So again, going back to how this would work. So I put in the packet 2 examples. So a good example is there's a $25 trip from Harvard or from Woodstock to Fox River Grove, right? This is an actual, I was on my Lyft app and I saw from Woodstock, my office in Woodstock to Fox River Grove was a 16-mile trip, $25 on Lyft, okay? So how this would work is if I was part of this program, a senior or whatever, I would pay, on my Lyft app, it would show that trip as $5. And I would say, book my trip, Lyft would come pick me up, and I would go to Fox River Grove for $5. Now in the back end, that trip was actually $25. That Lyft driver got paid $25 from PACE. PACE was recouped the $5 from the rider, and they gave the Lyft driver $20 of that $25 trip, okay? So the driver's still getting paid like it's any other trip on Lyft, that, subsidized or not. PACE comes in, or in this case, McHenry County would come in. Let me clarify that. McHenry County would be on the hook for that $20 beyond the first 5. And in the second example, a longer trip, let's say it was $39 on Lyft, rider would pay 5, county would pay 20, and the rider would pay the remaining 14. So that rider would actually have a $19 charge on their credit card. The county would pay $20 of that trip. Now, the reason we chose $20 as a starting point, and this is up for discussion, is that's roughly what we subsidize MC Ride today, per trip. So anytime somebody gets a ride on MC Ride, it costs McHenry County $20. So to us, that this is a cost neutral.
What's the cost to PACE on the MC Ride?
$20.
So it's $40. Okay.
Plus the rider fare, right?
So, reading between the lines, if this program is successful, it's the elimination of MC Ride, basically.
No, and we want to be very careful about that. So
Tell me why it
we
isn't.
put in the packet, this is not going to replace MC Ride. Some people that choose to use MC Ride today, because there's no other option, they'll choose to use this instead. So there'll be some transition from MC Ride to this program. But this program, you're not going to have a ton of wheelchair accessible vehicles. That's the first major important thing. MC Ride, every single vehicle in MC Ride is wheelchair accessible. And they have lifts for people, even not in wheelchairs. If you're in a walker, you can easily get on the MC Ride bus. These are Lyft drivers using their own vehicles. So that's the first thing I want to point out. The second thing is, this program that we're talking about is subject to the laws of supply and demand that currently is out there today with Lyft and Uber, right? Lyft and Uber, they don't really provide a lot of trips west of 47, to be perfectly blunt, because they don't make money doing that. There's not enough demand to even go west of 47. So MC Ride, because we're not looking to make a profit, we will go west of 47. We'll pick up anybody in Marengo, Harvard, Hebron, you name it. We're everywhere. So this program is going to have benefits for convenience, but it's going to have drawbacks in that people are going to find, I can't get a ride on it because my Lyft driver doesn't want to come pick me up in Harbor. Or if they do, it's gonna cost $50.
So one of our big problems in the past with MC Ride is the number of turndowns. How much do we expect this if Lyft drivers won't go to those areas either? How much are you expecting those turndowns to be?
I think any additional program we can provide is going to reduce the number of denials we have. So even though this isn't necessarily going to be a game changer for somebody in Hebron, because somebody in Woodstock chooses to use this program, that frees up a bus that maybe now could go to Hebron. So I think, again, it's increasing the supply of transit is gonna be helpful for everyone, no matter where you live in McHenry County.
So how did they come up with a limit of 8 trips per rider per day?
We talked through this with PACE staff, and they said, this is what is currently being done in DuPage County, where they have a similar program. They set a cap of eight rides per day. And I think in the city of Chicago, for their TAP program, they set a limit of 8 per day as well. So we just said, if that's what's being done elsewhere, that works, let's continue to do that here too. But you think about that's a lot of trips. I mean, and each one of those, that's $5 per trip for the rider, at least. It could be more. So that's $40. I doubt somebody's spending $40 a day hopping on Lyft and Uber. So there's an artificial cap just in terms of the fare that people are gonna pay for this kind of thing.
And is that a cash program also for that $5?
So no, this, because it's through Uber and Lyft, no cash.
No cash.
It's only on your phone. That's the only way you can get a ride. You get on your Lyft app, you get a ride.
Gotta
Just
have
like
an
any
app.
of us do today.
Okay.
This is very exciting. I wanna just reiterate. This
I
is-
asked all the questions. Anybody else got any questions? Brian?
I'm very excited about it. I think it's great because we've long talked about the fact that there's a huge gap in our services because of the restrictions with McRide and the limited pace routes that we have. So I think this is an effort to try to fill in that gap, and I'm extremely pleased. It basically is the same. I mean, in terms of
Cost neutral.
Yeah, cost neutral.
I'm good with it.
And in the last year, for those of you who were on the board at the time, in the last year, we had a ton of conversation on this. And so you have heard us and listened. So I do appreciate that.
So one of my questions
Tracy?
I did have a question of liability. I'm assuming that the PACE bus drivers maybe have CDLs or some
Yeah,
other license accreditation where a Lyft driver maybe doesn't.
yes, yeah, you're right. PACE currently contracts for drivers. So they're not PACE drivers that are operating for our program. It's a company called First Transit that drives for MC Ride. They have to meet every single PACE requirement because they're using PACE vehicles. So there's driver training, there's sensitivity training, they go through a litany of things before they can drive for PACE. This, because they're just, Mike could be a Lyft driver, right? And Mr. Scala is picking somebody up and
You get them there fast.
on behalf of this program, you're abiding by the Lyft requirements, not by PACE's requirements. As long as you meet I think Lyft has insurance requirements and some type of vehicle safety requirement, I'm sure, but there's not much. Not as much as what PACE provides as far as certainty for the rider. But this is a choice. Nobody's forcing a rider to use this program. So, and that's kind of the way we look at it here is MC Ride will always be the backbone providing most trips in McHenry County. And we know that service is high quality, it's gonna be there for people. This is something that if you're comfortable, is another option for you. You don't have to take it, but it's there for you if you need to.
Free option.
Regarding cost, I said cost neutral earlier, right? So, and I said that because I think some people will transition over. So that anybody that takes this instead of MC Ride, there's no additional cost there. This is probably, I don't know how many, but this is probably gonna generate some new riders. So those new riders, that's an additional cost.
Right.
And we need to somehow incorporate that into our budget for FY24.
So that's the next question, the last question I should say I was gonna ask is how do we incorporate this plan?
And we don't know what the demand's going to be. we won't know what the demand's gonna be until we see.
Question.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, way earlier in the year, I had suggested the idea of talking to the commercial places like Lyft or whatever, if they could incorporate this program for the county. Because it seems to me ironic that Pace now wants to do this, and yet all these years, we can't get them to step up to their plate electronically, but now all of a sudden they can for this? I don't have the packet, so I'm not seeing any of your information. I'm just listening.
Is it a first step possibly?
Yes, I think it's a first step. And keep in mind, this is independent of MC Ride. We've heard from
Right.
Pace that they're looking to implement technology on MC Ride in 2024. But again, they've been telling me that for a long time, so I don't believe it till I see it.
16, yeah.
But I'm encouraged that they're exploring new programs like this. And you know, the timing is interesting, Matt. I think it has a lot to do with the fiscal cliff coming up and some of the pressures that the transit agencies are under to kind of innovate and try new things, to sort of show that they're benefits to the region, right? So whatever the reason, I'm happy that they're trying stuff like this out.
Time frame?
2020, early 24, they want to get this rolling.
Okay. Mr. Kaminsky?
A question for you, you've been on the transportation. We had a discussion about, jacking up the fare for the seniors on MC Ride to basically a total of $2, and we're all worried about that. Here we're saying seniors with a discount, or disabled, $5. And I'm like, this hand you said we don't want to go that high because they ain't got the money, but this we're okay with. I'm confused.
My answer to that would be, that's a convenience. They can go anywhere with this, with the Lyft.
Okay.
And they don't have rejections. Well, they would have some rejections or turn downs, but they would have a lot less.
Okay.
That was a huge problem that we faced in the past, is the turn downs, rejections, denials.
That I didn't know about.
And again, this is an option.
Right.
MC Ride
This
is
is
always
the
gonna be
answer to
there.
that turn down. Yes, it would cost them more money, but they can get in the car and go anywhere. They're not limited to that route.
And not to stereotype, but I think you're not gonna see a ton of uptake by seniors initially because they're not as familiar with the technology and they may not have used Lyft before. There's a lot of people with disabilities, younger folks that maybe wanna get to MCC that would, on day one, they'd be using this. And this would be a great thing for a lot of younger folks that are already familiar with PNCs.
That's good. Go ahead.
Scott, I hear it a lot with the service organization, the veteran service organizations around. Why don't you have email blasts? Why don't we, text them? And a lot of blowback I get from them is they're older. They don't have that technology. They don't have emails. You made the comment that they're gonna have to do it on their iPhone. What if, we have seniors and disabled that they have the Help I've Fallen flip phone? How does that work for them?
Well, that's a decision for the county, I think, if we want to commit staff to helping people who don't have the technology in place. Like there are ways to reserve a Lyft ride for another person. You do it through your app for the person, but then you got to be on the phone with the rider and you got to get their information. You got to do that on your phone and do it. So, but that all takes time, and time is money. And thus far, we've been trying to minimize the number of staff hours.
I understand, here I hear this,
Yeah.
and then I hear you, and somehow the two aren't jiving.
Yeah, again, that's a decision above my pay grade if we want to commit or hire additional staff to do something like that.
No. I didn't.
Okay, good answer. All right, is there anything else on this one? Did we answer your questions enough?
You did. Thank you for listening to that long presentation. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, anything further on Pace, anything else? Nothing?
Nothing on Pace.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
Draft Transportation 2820, or 2428 Transportation Program.
You get more, Scott, now.
Well, this is gonna be short though. I just wanted to show.
I wanted you.
I was just
You're gonna see a
show-
lot of Scott today.
Not too much, just the website. No, yeah, just the website. So I just wanted to show everybody the draft program, 24 to 28, is on our DOT website. It's gonna be up for public comment for the next month. And the idea is, I don't have a formal presentation today on the contents of the program, but the idea is if we get any comments before next month, we'll revise the document and bring it forward for your consideration in November, on November 1st. Just a big picture though, $372 million worth of projects over the next 5 years. $170 million of that is county funds going to projects, matched by federal, state, and other agencies. We updated the revenues to accommodate the county option motor fuel tax increase that was just approved. So that generates, an additional $15 million over that 5-year period. And then we also then moved our capital equipment, our trucks, snow plows, things like that, into the county option fund, paid for out of the county option now. So you're gonna see some changes in our maintenance program that are reflective of what was approved the other night at county board. So otherwise, this is it's a fiscally constrained plan. So what's in here is debits equal credits. There's not some fluff in here that we're gonna have to cut projects at the end of the 5-year period. Everything in here is fiscally constrained. So I can answer questions. I know you haven't had a chance to look at it, but please go online and take a look. If you scroll down, Greg, it's right here, right under We Are MCDOT. Keep going a little bit more. Under Looking Ahead, it just says McHenry County DOT is proud to announce our draft plan here. You can click on that and download it and take a look at it.
And for those of you that are interested, it is a thick packet, as you know. If you want to see the highlights, go to Appendix B. On the document, and it shows you the changes from last year's program. And there's 17 changes.
Yep, so that's it. Any questions? Can I move on to the next?
You mentioned there's a 30-day for comments and everything. Is that in there also that they commented?
So yeah, we're gonna do some social media releases. We'll probably do a press release saying that this is out there. Sorry, what?
No, never mind.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, we will get the word out that we want people to take a look at it and comment by this date. I think we're gonna set the end of October as our comment date. And if we get a ton of comments about a specific thing, we can talk about that next month and make revisions accordingly, so. Yeah.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Certainly go online and take a look at it.
Yes.
And I can email it out to everybody after the meeting too.
Oh, that'd be great.
All right, so, will we have that on our agenda next month?
Yes. Yeah, because it needs to be approved.
Approved.
Remember, as we made the change years ago, that this comes along simultaneously with the budget process.
We'll have the 30 days
Yeah.
completed by our next meeting.
Yep.
Okay. All right, next item, and we have some guests in the crowd too. Township Bridge Assistance Program. Who's gonna present this? You all have a handout that you just got this morning, and it's the first time we've seen this. To open this discussion up, it's no action today on this. This is purely discussion to begin the brainstorming of this.
Yes, I'll give a couple opening remarks.
Go
So,
ahead.
just along the same lines as Chairman Kearns here, this issue was brought up by committee members. It's been discussions at the strategic plan. It has come up in discussion when we bring contracts forward, kind of what Chairman Kearns alluded to for item 5.3 when we did the Allendale Road Township Bridge. So it's come up here. Staff was asked to take a look at what our existing program is. And there's been some discussions, and Scott, again, I said you wouldn't get away from Scott. He's here again with this to cover it at we'll say a high level, but it's gonna get into examples that might get into the weeds a little bit, but it's really intended to give you an understanding of what the program is and then where should it be desired to make any changes to the program. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott.
So I know everybody wants to read the memo. I'll say maybe it's better if you follow along with me in the presentation, and if you need to reference the memo kind of gives a little bit more detail, but I don't want people to get ahead of themselves a little bit here. So I'm going to go through this a little quick. I'm going to set the stage first, kind of giving an overview of bridges in McHenry County. So we've got bridges on the county system. There's 48 of them. Bridges and culverts in the National Bridge Inventory, which are a higher level, so they meet a certain length, and they become part of the NBI. So we've got 48 on our system, and then the townships have 81 bridges in their system. That's the 17 townships have 81 bridges between the 17 of them. In blue, you can see the township structures. A lot of them are west of 47. The county structures are in black. We've got quite a little bit more on the interspersed throughout the entire county. And I'll just point out that the county structures are underneath roads that carry a lot more traffic, which makes sense, right? The county is the higher level of roadway jurisdiction. Our bridges are a little bit bigger, more expensive than the township structures are, which are typically on smaller scales. You can see the breakdown between culverts and bridges between both of them. Average age, the township structures are older. They're pushing 46 years. The average county structure is 38 years old. Sufficiency rating it's a 100-point scale. So 100 is a perfect newly built bridge is 100 sufficiency rating. If it's down to 0, that means you got a bridge that's fallen apart. And anywhere in between there is kind of a gauge on how good the condition is. So you can see the average sufficiency rating for township structures is lower than the county structures. The number of bridges under 80 sufficiency rating, the townships have 43, the county's got 21. And then what we consider to be sort of a, let's get going on a project is this 50, bridges under 50 sufficiency rating. About a quarter of the township structures meet that threshold, and about only 10%, 8% of the county structures are under 50 at this point. So summarizing, county structures are in better condition than the township structures are. Townships have more, the counties are in better condition. So how are things done today? So you all just saw a resolution for a township structure. We'll use that as a good example here. So the county conducts bridge inspections for not only our bridges, but also the township's bridges as well. Every other year, every even year, we go out and we take an inventory. We use a consultant to go do it, but we kind of measure the condition of all the structures. Bridges below 50 are eligible for federal bridge money. Okay, if you're under 50, you're eligible for federal bridge money, which typically pays 80% of the cost to replace that bridge. We then we take the bridges that are in bad condition, we get them in our 5-year program, which I just talked about earlier, and then we kick off a project. The county will go out, we'll hire a consultant to start phase 1, and we'll take that bridge project, the township bridge project, all the way from phase 1 all the way through construction, and we, the county, have historically paid the local match every step of the way. So we'll fund the 20% local match for every single phase. And the township thus far, since we've been doing this, hasn't been asked to pay anything for their bridges.
In that question, are any of the townships voluntarily been paying a portion?
Not for federal work. So anytime we're doing a federal project that gets federal grant money, that's just the county that's been doing that. The townships have done some locally funded work on their own, right? So if they've got some money in their budget, we've got some money in our budget, we'll go out and we'll do a small rehab, or we'll do some preventative maintenance type activities. The townships do pay for some of that work, yes. Okay. But not for the federal project work. So just to kind of give an overview, there's 10 bridges currently in engineering right now. 10 township bridges we're currently working on in phase 1 or phase 2. We've got 2 more in the program that I just talked about. There's 2 more that are going to start phase 1 either next year or the year after, so they're coming up soon. So those 12 make up about $35 million. It's actually a little bit more now in our 5-year program. And that's total cost, right? So the feds are going to pay 80% of that. The county will pay the 20% of that. And I wanted to point out, this relationship where the county pays for everything is unique in Illinois. It doesn't happen very often. Will County is the only county in the region that does help their townships out. So how Will County does it is, Will County will match the township 50-50 on engineering and construction. So if, it doesn't matter what the township is or what the bridge is, Will County says, if you want to get 50% funding from us, let me know, and we'll pay for 50% of it. But the townships lead the project. Townships are the one managing the consultant, doing the engineering. They just ask Will County to write a check for 50% of the cost, okay? And importantly, Will County doesn't pay for right-of-way. The townships acquire the right-of-way on their own without any county help. So that is something that is more like what we're doing. It's not completely what we're doing, but it's kind of the halfway point between what most counties do, which is nothing, and what we do, which is everything. So we put some options together. So first option is we just keep doing what we're doing. It's worked for several decades, and we could just keep doing what we're doing right now. The second one is we try to find a way to modify our level of assistance to sort of reduce the county's burden or assistance, and then ultimately get the county out of the business of township structures altogether over a period of time. It's not going to be right away, but after 5, 10, or 15 years, the townships maybe are asked to step up and take care of their structures themselves. So here are some options or some ideas that we came up with. Again, this is the first presentation we've done to this committee, and it's subject to change depending on feedback we get here. So there's really kind of three big changes in here. I'm going to go through them one by one. So the first one is, if you concur with this approach, in starting next year, any new bridge that we start phase 1 engineering on that's not currently in our program. So if I mentioned how there's a ton of bridges out there on the township system that need to start engineering soon. Any one of those bridges comes forward in the future, next year, 2025, whenever, the county is no longer the lead agency. The townships will be the one to hire the consultant, to manage the project, and the county is just going to be a funder going forward. Okay, so that's first change.
Scott, does that include the 2 Perkins bridges?
My approach has always been, the county board committed to doing those 2 bridges, Perkins and Perkins, years ago.
That's all I
under the
wanted
old
to-
system. So I would consider those grandfathered in. We're going to handle those 100% county, but any new project that makes it into our program would be subject to these changes, if that makes sense. So in addition to the township being the lead agency now, there will be a cost share agreement. There'll be an IGA with the township to begin the project. And in that IGA, we will lay out what the county's support will be financially. So it'll be a percentage of the overall cost for each phase, okay?
On the needy townships,
Say again?
on the smaller townships, or all of
Well,
them.
we'll get there next. That's the
Okay,
next slide.
sorry,
I'll
Scott.
get into that.
Sorry.
So there'll be a cost share, the townships will be in the lead. The third thing is, we're gonna tell the townships, if you all agree with this approach, that our contribution, our financial commitment is limited. It's not forever, right? There's going to be a sunset after so many years where the county will no longer be supporting the townships with their structures. So they need to start thinking about, if your levy is insufficient to fund your structures, there needs to be some recognition that that levy might need to change going forward in order so that the county, and so the townships can maintain their own structures. So those 3 things are kind of the crux of everything you're going to see at the next slide here. So when I presented this, I actually went to a township road commissioners meeting back in 2021, I think, 2020. No, it was 2020, I think. And at that time, I threw out the concept of a 50-50, just like Will County has. I said, it works in Will County. What if the county funded 50% going forward? And the townships paid 50%. And I got a lot of pushback, to be perfectly honest. I heard a lot of townships say, especially the more rural townships, that even 50% is too much. And I understand that. It makes perfect sense. So we went back to the drawing board, and I came up with this like sliding scale, I'm calling it. So you can kind of see the whole principle is, if you're a smaller township, you don't have financial resources as much as others, you should get more county assistance if you're a smaller township. And then townships with less bridges, you know, they don't need as much county assistance because they don't have as many structures to replace. So the whole idea is, if you look at the top slide here, the top table, on the left-hand side, you've got annual township road district revenues. So I added up, and this is from 2020, so this is old now, but this was what it was in 2020. Townships that get over $1 million in revenue for their road district, a combination of MFT and levy. And then if you scroll over here, the number of township structures. So if you're a rather wealthy township and you have 0 to 3 bridges, the county's not going to help you at all. The idea would be you've got the resources to maintain your structures today. But as you scroll over, the more bridges you have, even the wealthy townships, they would have some level of county assistance. Now let's take that down to the next table here. I actually popped in where all these townships land in this. So you can see here, Algonquin, Dorr, McHenry, and Nunda fit into this low need category. They've got a lot of money and not a lot of structures. So do they really need county assistance going forward? Probably not. So I put that as they would be on their own going forward under this proposal. And to be perfectly frank, those 4 townships, they do a lot of stuff themselves without county help today. So this wouldn't be necessarily a huge change from status quo. As we head down, Grafton Township's got less resources, financial resources, and they've got, I think, only 2 or 3 bridges. So they would qualify for some county assistance, but only about 20%. So the county would pay 20% of their local match. They would pay 80% of the local match. And then obviously Alden, Burton, Greenwood would be in the 60% category. So townships would pay 60%, county would pay 40%. And then going down to the more rural townships that have a ton of structures, it's, you know, the county's gonna pay 60 or even 80% going forward. So, you know, a lot of times I think of, especially these 4 townships, they've got, you know, 9, 10, 11 bridges, each of them in their system, and they've got not a lot of revenue that come in every year. So these are really the neediest 4 townships out there. The county would still be there to help them with 80% of the federal funding, or 80% of the local match to the federal funding. So, are you still with me today? All right, I'll keep going here. So I put at the bottom here, and this is all in your memo that I handed out to. This is an example township bridge project, right? So phase 1, phase 2, right-of-way acquisition, wetland credit, construction, and you can see the breakdown. The feds fund roughly 80%. There's some state money. There's called the Township Bridge Program the state provides. That would go towards construction. And then you can see, this is an example for Alden or Greenwood Township. So the townships pay 60%. You can see how that breaks out between the 2 here. So at the end of the day, an example Greenwood Township bridge, Greenwood Township would be on the hook for $362,000 total for a new bridge, and the county would pay $241,000 for a new bridge. And we'd match the federal funds with that money. So all told, it's a $4 million structure that the township would pay about $360,000 for. So that's sort of, I wanted to kind of put that in perspective for everyone as we go through this. So I want to just get through this slide, and then I'll open it up for questions or comments or anything, because this is probably the most important slide that I'll show. So I mentioned number of structures per township. You can see the neediest townships, Chemung, Dunham, Marengo, Seneca. Those are the 4 that I mentioned before that are in this high need category, right? So keep an eye on them too. I mentioned we've already got 12 bridges in our 5-year program. Those are going to be 100% county, just like they've always been, right? We're not going to change the rules of the game mid-game and change that, so we're going to continue paying for that. Which leaves 62 bridges that are not in the program. And you can see the breakdown per township. And then taking a look at bridges that are not in our program, but are in bad condition. Okay, so these are bridges that are either over 50 years old or they're under 50 in sufficiency rating. So they're either really old or they're in bad condition. So you can see how that shakes out. There's 25 bridges that fit that definition in the township system. These are the bridges that would be subject to the cost share that I just talked about at the last slide. So this is where, depending on where they fell in that table, they would be subject to that cost share, but the townships would lead the project. The county would be the funding, they would help fund, but the townships would be the one leading that project. And I put here the percentages. These are the township percentages on what the townships would need to pay. So I always point to Chemung. You know, they've got, in this scenario, they've got one bridge in bad condition that needs to be addressed soon. They pay 20% for that, of the local share for that one bridge. The county would pay 80% of the local share. Now, what happens with the rest? So these are the ones that need to be addressed now. These are the remaining ones that either aren't in our program, they're not in our program, and they're not subject to this cost share. Everything else would be sort of the townships would be on their own for the rest of those structures in the future, right? So if, you know, in my system that I've created here, those would be 100% funded and led by the township. So there'd be no cost share for these 37, only for the 25 that I mentioned here. And the reason for that is, again, if we open up the cost share to all township bridges, we're going to be doing this for the next 50 years, because that's the lifespan on these bridges. It's about 50 years. So is that something that the county wants to commit to for the next 50 years? I don't think so. This at least gives a timeline where it's going to take many years to get through these 25, but at least there's sort of a finish line in sight, so to speak. So that was my proposal. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, and I can answer questions if there are any at this point.
Could you go back to that last slide?
Mm-hmm.
On your columns, the future township responsibility, what was your criteria in those? They're over 50%?
Yeah, so, no, so
The far right column.
Yeah, no, I know. In order to get these, you got to get everything else. So I took the structures that are in our program today, and I took that out. I looked at structures that are in bad condition today, and I took those out. Everything that's left, so these are bridges that are in pretty good condition. They're either really young or they're over 50 in sufficiency rating, so they've got plenty of time before we need to start doing anything with these bridges. Now, keep in mind, this is half. Half the bridges are in pretty good condition on the township system. The other half, not so good condition, and we need to start thinking about how we start paying for engineering on these other bridges. So, again, this last column is, we're not already committed to doing it, they're not very old, and they're in pretty good condition. I'll say that. Sorry it's so complicated. It's 16 townships, it gets a little tough to break us down easily to understand.
Okay. One of the reasons I brought up our 5.3 in the beginning was, you know, we have a lot of newer board members that aren't familiar with this process so I mean, you can read it and you can sit there and go, still not understand the length of time it actually takes to fulfill this. So for our everyone, go through that process on that Greenwood Bridge and talk about the length of time, and also there's a chart in there on that one, a scale on that particular bridge of the letting. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Daryl and Joy, speak up if I misrepresent anything. You know, from the moment we start a phase 1 preliminary engineering on a bridge to the moment it's constructed can be anywhere from 5 to 7 years. Is a good guess at this point. 5 to 7 years from start to finish.
And that's triggered by, the beginning is triggered by?
It's triggered by us taking a look at the bridge condition and saying, this bridge isn't going to make it 7 years, or we need to get to this bridge as soon as possible. Let's get it in our program and start engineering. So we look at the condition rating, we say, this is the highest priority bridge, and then we start engineering on that bridge. That's really the process at this point.
Or is it a bridge that is a sudden failure, begins into that program immediately?
Correct, we've got a few of those where we've closed lanes or even shut down the bridge completely, and that triggers us getting it into the program as well.
The other balance to what Scott was saying is we have to manage staff load. We only have a handful of engineers to run these projects. We can't bring in all the bridges that are needed at this one moment because we don't have the staff capacity to do that and to manage these engineering contracts.
But let's
So it's a
continue
balance between the
on,
need and us having staff to complete.
let's continue on with your process though, of this particular bridge.
So 2 to 3 years for phase one, 2 years, let's say 2 years. All right, we'll do 3 years.
IDOT is slowing us down quite a bit. 3.
So 3 years before we're finished with the phase one, which is the first step in the process. Then we gotta go in, we gotta get another engineer on board to do the phase two, the design engineering for the bridge itself. That could be a 2-year process, 2 to 3 year process as well. And then, assuming IDOT is giving us the federal money, and again, it's not guaranteed, we have to request federal funding from IDOT, and they've historically been good about giving us the federal money, but as of late, it's become more of an uncertain thing. We typically then will line up the federal money for construction and replace the bridge. But again, that's 5 to 7 years out from the start.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
And-
it's a 7-year process. And Scott didn't mention that land acquisition. That happens in phase 2, where we have to buy the additional property, which is usually an 18-month process to go through that. Especially, we have to have IDOT certify that, and making sure that it follows all of their procedures.
And what's awkward too is we've been purchasing the right-of-way in the county's name for these township structures, which is kind of an awkward situation to begin with too. I mean, these are township bridges on township roads, but because the county's the one leading the project, we're the one acquiring the right-of-way for these bridges. So again, just to kind of show everybody the table here, this is the process. Phase 1, phase 2, we then purchase the right-of-way during phase 2, get into construction in year 6 or 7.
So we approved on this Greenwood, we just approved this today, the resolution for phase 2, I believe. And that one's been in process since 19?
Correct. That was a 2019 start, so we're getting to phase 2 here in 2023.
And then we would expect that one, if I'm looking at those charts correctly, 26?
Yeah. That's a pretty good window of time. It all comes down to IDOT at this, we can control our side. It's getting the approvals and the land acquisition, the approvals from IDOT and land acquisition.
And that's an important piece that I didn't mention earlier. So IDOT slows the process down. We don't have to go through the federal process, but if we don't get the federal money. So we can go quicker, we can go cheaper, total, but we're gonna miss out on this $3 million of federal money. So it's ultimately gonna cost us more if we forego the federal money, but we can get it done in 4 years, potentially. So that's just something we always consider and balance on our end too. We did that with Johnsburg Road. Johnsburg Road was a good example. We started the federal process with Johnsburg Road. We realized we can't wait. This bridge needs to be replaced. So we said, no thank you to the federal money. We went and did it locally, and we were able to do it quicker that way.
How much cheaper? Did we estimate how much we saved?
Johnsburg was gonna cost us somewhere in the range of $7 million all in.
Oh, that was
With,
total bridge, right?
that was the bridge. The bridge would have needed to be raised several feet, so it would have impacted the intersection right of way, wetland impacts. We were into it for about 7 million plus or minus, and engineering. We were about $1.5 million, I think, from a construction side, from the bridge deck and the ordering the beams early, and then a few $100,000 from the engineering side. Less than half, third, all in, to replace that deck to get a 50-year extension of life on that structure versus going through the Fed process for $7 million, which would have been a home bridge.
Anybody else have questions, pipe in anytime. Mike? Matt, go ahead. We can't see you, we can only hear you, so pipe in anytime you want.
Well, I understand looking at numbers, this all makes sense numbers-wise, but having done a couple of construction projects in my life, I realize this isn't just as simple as flipping the switch over. Townships would be required to staff up for people to apply for these grants and federal monies, engineers. I mean, this is a big ask to say, let's just do this as of a year. To me, this needs to have some sort of a phasing in process, or phasing out, depending on how positive you look at it, where townships may even have access to county engineers and or at least county staff who's gone through the process before, so that it can be taught on the township level. Otherwise, the hurdle of learning this, hiring for the staff and then paying for these bridges, it's a huge tax burden on the townships.
Yeah, we agree. We agree, Matt. It's not something that's going to happen like the flip of a switch. We're fully aware that we're going to need to work hand in hand with the townships to make sure they understand the process as well as our engineers do. And we've already committed that if this was to get implemented, we would spend that first year or two working with existing commissioners and any new commissioner that comes aboard to kind of teach them the ropes, so to speak, and be a resource for them, just like the county's already a resource for the townships on a lot of other projects that we do, whether it's the resurfacing program or anything else. So we would be there. We're not going to cut the townships off and say, good luck. This would be something we'd do hand in hand.
Yeah, that's fine, but it's still a long-term commitment, because as an elected position in many of these township positions, unless you're lucky enough to elect an engineer to these, you would be retraining people or needing staff on hand that would not have to be reacquire these skills each time there's an election cycle.
I agree, but keep in mind, townships elsewhere in Illinois, they do it already, right? This is not new anywhere else in Illinois. This is the process.
I'm not saying this doesn't need to happen. I'm just saying this would have to be thought out. This is a 3-day conversation, not a 30-minute conversation.
Understood.
Mike was next.
Oh, yeah, no.
I was just gonna, similar to what Matt just talked about, I was gonna ask you to kind of explain the process by which that transfer of knowledge would happen. And quite honestly, it should be written down. I mean, it should be, you should have a procedure manual that, because as those commissioners switch over, you still gotta have a manual by which they can use and utilize. And it's, my other concern is, what does that mean going forward? You may not have people run for that election office because they're like, this is a crap load of work that's got to be done that they haven't been doing. And I'm not saying that they would shy away from it, but there's also a lot of responsibility and burdens. I mean, especially out west, when you have a bunch of structures, and we've had situations already where we've had farmers not be able to get to their fields because we've had bridges that, basically the state shut down and said, you're not allowed traffic over them anymore. And that, I don't want a farmer driving their combine 5 miles just to get to their field, which is on the other side of a creek. I mean,
I hear you. And we would definitely, this isn't my area, it would be under Daryl, but we would write down that manual. We would give the townships a manual to follow, a step-by-step cookbook, so to speak, of here's everything you need to know from QBS, qualifications-based selection of your consultant, all the way through, doing RFQs and everything else. Because again, if the townships haven't done this, they're not going to have anything to go off unless we give them something. And we would aim to give them something to do that.
And to that point, a bulk of that information is already out there. IDOT has their Bureau of Local Roads and Streets manual, and that's pretty much what we follow. It has all the steps on the environmental side, on the design side, on the coordination side. That manual has a lot in it already. And then us helping facilitate, like Joe would say all the time, relationships matter. Helping these townships get connected with the right staff at IDOT in the Local Roads Bureau to really help them with either transfers from one elected to the next, and knowing those right people to ask questions of too.
And keep this in mind, the county, through the Council of Mayors, we have a staff person that does all the federal programming of federal funds for not just the townships, but also the cities. So we're already doing the federal programming of the federal money for all local agencies, township, city, county. We do it all through the DOT. So a lot of it, it's not just going to be a complete, the biggest thing townships are going to get used to is managing the consultant through the engineering process. That's something that is going to be new for them. But as far as the federal programming and coordinating with IDOT and CMAP, we're always going to be part of that conversation just because of our staff that we have at the DOT. So it's not going to be a complete overhaul.
I made my.
Okay, John, I think you had one next.
I can only imagine, Scott, maybe you know or maybe you don't, or you know the Association of Townships throughout the state, in central Illinois where they're small townships. In the real world, do they hire a one-stop shop where the guy is a consultant and he submits all the paperwork? How is it done in some of the really rural areas where they have township? I mean, because it's nice to have Big Brother McHenry County helping out all the way through this, but in the real world, how's it done? If we are one of the few counties that do this.
I wish I could speak more to that question, but I'm not as familiar once you get out of the Chicago region with how the townships interact on their bridges. It's not my area of expertise. I could do some more research before our next meeting and get back to you on that.
I'd be curious to know that.
Okay, good question.
Yeah, I would too. But, looking at Hebron Township's appropriations for next year, their road and bridge fund, they're appropriating $273,000. Their hard road is almost 164,000. So how can the smaller townships absorb that?
It's going to take a lot of planning. Because again, these structures will last over 50 years if you take care of them. So you break out the cost that I have here, $250,000 over 50 years per structure. And it's something you can't just, if it's a sudden expense, it's hard to come up with $250,000. But if you have 50 years to plan ahead for the eventual replacement of that structure, that's how you're able to come up with the money. But I'm not saying it's easy, trust me, it's not.
So tell me how in their levy they would appropriate that every year so that they don't get in a too much money in their levy and have to pay it back to the taxpayers.
Yeah.
And have you studied with the townships, their different levy structure for bridges? There's more than one levy structure, am I correct?
There's not.
Yeah,
there's a special, we
Dick
can
Ode?
appropriate a special bridge fund, but that has to go through a referendum, basically. But we live in a capped county. How do you keep up with the costs in a capped county with a levy, with normal conditions, with prices rising, and then also add in a bridge at $300,000, $400,000? How do you do that? In 50 years, please explain how do you do that. And the other question I got for you, Scott,
What?
the research that you've done, is that just in this area? Because I know downstate, the counties work hand in hand with townships in very rural areas.
Can you introduce yourself and what you are to the township?
I'm Don Goad,
Don.
Highway Commissioner at Greenwood Township. So, and Scott's come to our meetings and we've expressed some of our concerns.
Are you the chairman of the road?
Yeah, I'm the president of the county association.
Okay, just so you know
Thanks, I was just curious.
what his position is.
And you had mentioned it, how it's done in some of the smaller ones. I'd like to know more about that.
Well, and I think that's extremely important because we're sitting there talking about what Tracy brings up. It doesn't matter how big your township is, it's the matter of how much your bridge is gonna cost within that township. And that's the important thing. And then how do they fund it? I mean, 11 bridges in one township. How do they fund that when they never have the population or the tax base to ever get to fund those bridges. And if the federal government stops providing that 80% match and it really looks like it's gonna head that way.
Not to be a doomsayer, if the federal government stops their 80% match, we'll all be in a world of hurt.
Right.
Not just the townships. The
Right.
county will not
Right.
be able to fund these bridges 100%. So,
And understand these programs are discretionary programs by IDOT, which means they can be cut at any time.
Okay, and the next question is there's a definition of culvert. Some of us say, well, let's just take out a bridge, this box bridge, and throw culverts in. What's the definition, the requirement of the culvert, of a dimension of a culvert that can be replaced over a water span? Isn't it like 6 feet or something like that, that you have to put a span bridge in?
I would think the engineers could answer that, but a 3 culvert system now is considered a bridge, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
A certain span.
There's a certain span, I want to say it's 30 feet. If your series of culverts equals 25 to 30 feet, it's considered a bridge. And it's put into the bridge inventory that the county does inspections for the townships. But the bigger thing from replacing a bridge to a culvert is really the hydraulics. And over the past 5 years, IDNR, the state and others have changed how hydraulics are looked at, the amount of rainfall intensity due to, call it climate change, or call it whatever, but we see bigger rain events. And that's called Bulletin 75. And that's what's causing a lot of the township bridges that we run through, and even the county structures, need to be raised 3 to 5 feet from where they sit today. And then the openings get bigger because we have to account for more water passing under that structure. To say that you have 2 or 3 culverts now, and to say, well, we'll just replace them, it's not going to be equivalent. You're going to end up needing to put 5 culverts in, depending on the situation, and you're better off doing a bridge. And so some of the townships have come talk to us, hey, I just want to replace these culverts. We're like, I don't think IDNR is going to let you. IDOT won't let you because they're going to have to look at the equivalent for hydraulics, and those 3 culverts are going to turn into probably a 50-foot bridge, 70-foot bridge, depending on the new water requirements.
Because that certainly would be the direction I would think a lot of them would head to because of the cost.
Sure.
Especially if that 80% goes away.
One of the things that'll happen, well, that if highway commissioners get in control, they don't have the money to do this, they'll close the road if it's unsafe conditions. So impeding traffic anywhere is not something that anybody wants to happen. And it has happened prior in Marengo, they had roads closed. So you go back to Mr. Reinhardt's comment about farmers going all the way around, that will happen for 4, 5, 6 year periods until the money's available. So I guess one of the questions I got to ask is where this initiative came from originally, when everything is working great, and now all of a sudden we have some kind of initiative where the townships are responsible for more of the things when we partner with the county on all of their projects that we do and stuff, work hand in hand with them. Maybe we do stuff for them, they do stuff for us. So, and also, if instead of meeting here, if we could get our highway commissioners together and meet with the board and maybe discuss some of the problems that arise instead of doing it at a meeting like this, because it's really hard to discuss. You know, I'm not going to give everybody's opinion. All townships have different, but
Well, going
back to Tracy's comment, Hebron Township, maximum levy they have is $200,000. So how do you maintain roads and bridges with that kind of money? And we would be raising taxes is like, that is unheard of today. You can't do that. We'd be under the scrutiny of all of our taxpayers, you know, and our boards, would they let us, you know, raise the levies that much in order to do this? So.
Well, I think part of one answer, I think, for you is I think the intention is we will have to have joint meetings. I would expect that we would have a joint meeting that they could all talk and voice their opinions and their concerns before we would ever implement something. I don't believe, I and I'm not speaking for everyone here, that we should shove this down their throats without their full input on this and take any action. I do believe these guys know a lot how their operation works also, and their financial, Hebrew and everything. You really gotta see it all and hear it all, and talk about the individual bridges in each township, because it's some of them aren't gonna be able to do this. But getting a happy medium, if we choose to do this, one question is, how did we even get to the point that the county were one of 2 counties in the entire state of 102 counties that actually aid in the township bridges, which we pay for our portion of them? At what point did we switch over to that? And I've always suspected the township supervisors used to be the county board members, that's how we actually got to this point. And is there a time have we always paid?
That's all before anybody's time.
So we've always done it, basically.
Even yours?
Even mine. Yes.
So I just want to say, I do appreciate Mr. Goet's perspective. I enjoy listening to him, and I'm taking good feedback from him, and the rest of the highway committee. The whole point is not to again, throw them off to their own and just leave them out hanging to dry. It's to find that happy medium where they're able to maintain their structures, the county is able to help in that, but I just want to make sure I point that out, Don. It's not that this isn't something against the townships. This is just something we want to find a happy compromise.
All right, so the staff issue, okay, that our problem is we don't have the staff to do this.
That is the number one problem.
Okay, so can we reach a happy medium, even if it's not so much paying the bill or not, possibly, is the staffing issue of can the townships head some of these projects? Can we reach a different medium down the road? And that's why I don't want to rush into this without full vetting of this whole program and back and forth. I mean, this could take a long time. Some of us might not be in the board any longer by the time we make this decision, because we're going to continue status quo as it is right now until the full board, and not just this committee, the full county board would have to make this decision. And this committee does not have the authority to make this kind of a decision.
So going back to staffing, as mentioned, there's 25 structures that need to be addressed now that are not in our program. So new projects that would have to come through. We couldn't take on more than 2, maybe if we pressed it, 3 township bridges a year. So that would take us, over a decade to get even all of these bridges that need to be addressed today into the program. And then another 5 or 7 years to actually get to construction.
And before the next wave that are sitting on the 55 to 60.
I mean, at some point, we're gonna have to incorporate the private sector to help anyway.
Well, we are. I mean, we're doing that already, and we're still not able to keep up. And so that's part of the problem, is the staffing. The staffing is, and if there's issues with the cost share, that's something, if the committee feels that that's an unfair cost share, we'd love to hear that. If that's really the issue that I'm hearing, is that they can't afford it, not that they can't lead these projects, but they can't afford the cost share, we can change that accordingly.
Can I make a point too?
Go ahead.
So, again, this is a 3-day conversation, not a 30-minute, but maybe some sort of a hybrid of this is that all the townships, possibly on Scott's model, put forth monies to the county's department, and they staff up just for bridges, and then as this phases out in the future, that portion of the county's bridge staff could augment into the townships or some sort of a generalized full township assistance. The staff will be the first portion to do this, just to acquire those matching funds.
I can see a bifurcation of something like that, but
Brian,
wow.
I'm gonna call
Who's
Brian.
watching it?
First off, I do think that this is a hugely worthy effort for us to look at. I think that across the board, for the benefit of townships, the county, as well as all of our residents, this is a hugely important issue for us to look at. So I really appreciate the time that's gone into this consideration and the effort here. And I do believe that it was a logical effort in terms of methodology. I think that that is a good way to look at it because there are a lot of variables to consider. I think the unbelievably strong, almost non-movable variable that's out there for many of the townships is the fact that they simply can't raise enough money anyway. I mean, they're never going to be able to raise enough money. And so because of the cap, et cetera, I think that they are really limited and we have to respect and understand that. Counties in other parts of the state of Illinois don't suffer from that same cap, but we do here in our region. And so I think we have to put that out there on the table and understand that. Second thing is, I do believe that the discussion, as Matt has indicated and others, discussion is going to lead to some other options and opportunities, and I concur with the chair that we couldn't move anything forward without having a full, complete, open, and deep drilling conversation with our township supervisors. That's really important, in our highway commissioners. I do think as well that in the model that is here, it probably, and I hate to say it this way, but I think maybe we need to be a little bit more specific because you've done a great job with the structure of the model, but I think we're going to have to be more realistic in terms of the divisions. And the divisions might be as extreme as one bridge. If you got one bridge, it's going to be this. If you got two bridges, here's another. If you got three bridges, it's something different. Because I think that we have to be realistic in terms of who has the bridges specifically and look at it in that regard. So I would encourage that kind of consideration. Finally, I do understand that we are going to have a labor force issue, a capacity issue. And colleagues have already mentioned the fact that that's probably not existing right now in the townships. So now it's going to take time to transition or to train or to move into that. But one of my questions would be, all right, if we remove this level of efforts from our county engineers right now, what is that going to open up for us? You know, what are we going to now gain by doing that versus continue to maintain the status quo in terms of our commitment to these efforts? But I do agree, we've got to develop a larger capacity, and the only way to do that, in my opinion, is through a collaborative effort. We've got to work together.
Well, I'll speak on the last question you had. So if this model were implemented and the townships led these projects, that unlocks the ability for more than just 2 township bridges to come through the county's process every year. We could see 4 or 5 township bridges come forward next year. If the county is just writing a check, we're not providing staff assistance for those, more bridges could get done more quickly. Right now, we have this artificial funnel because of the staffing constraints that those 25 township bridges have to fit through this funnel. They can only do 2 at a time. And so this gets more stuff done more quickly under this model, assuming the townships want to move forward and lead these projects with county funding. The second thing is, what does this unlock for our program? We've got projects in our program that keep getting pushed back year after year after year, county projects, because we don't have the engineers to deliver those projects because we're doing township projects. And that's just the reality of the situation. We don't want to see a township bridge close. And so oftentimes a bridge that we didn't expect rises to the top of the program because we're trying to make sure that bridge stays open and safe for the public. And that pushes out other priorities that the county has on its system. Which you can, if you read through the 5-year program, you'll see all the projects I'm talking about that are in the out years. We'd love to move forward quicker. So that's just sort of my attempt at answering that. Again, I'm seeing this as a positive. We can get more bridges done under this model than we can do today. And I know the townships may disagree with that assertion because of the funding, but again, our constraint is staff. It's not funding, it's staff capacity.
Mike?
So I was gonna answer Don's question about where did this come from. I've been on the board for 10 years, and part of being chair of finance, I was tasked with trying to figure out ways to cut budgets and look at funding sources for all different things. I've been on transportation for, I think, all 10 of those years also. And one of the things that was brought up was about township bridges, and the whole discussion we're having right now has happened numerous times over those 10 years. So probably, I don't know, 5 years ago maybe or something, I sat down with staff and kind of tried to wrap my head around this whole program and what we're really doing. And so that was that's how long ago it started in order to get to where we are today with this meeting. And it's, again, like everybody said, it's not necessarily we want to cut off townships. You know, this what you're seeing today has evolved from 5 years ago when that was first talked about and dialogued. I think the focus is for the county, how do we justify what we're doing financially for the townships, and how do we go about having a transition to the townships for some of the responsibility and in some cases the cost of this bridge program. And I don't want to see I don't want to see roads closed. I mean, I mentioned that already. I don't want to see farmers, have to take their combine all over the place to try and get to their fields. And the west side of the county is a huge concern. And so to me, it's getting to this point where we can start to have a discussion not only with townships on a board basis, because staff has already had, the relationship for a long time, and that doesn't need to be fixed. That to me has been a healthy, great relationship. But from the board's level, who, I have board members now and in the past that come back and say, well, we shouldn't be spending money on things that we're not responsible for. I hear this all the time as a board member. Well, if the state doesn't mandate that the county spend money on this, why are we spending money on it? And so then the board has to make the decision, as a larger, overreaching situation, do we spend money on programs that might be beneficial for county residents that we don't necessarily have to spend money on? It's not mandated that we do. And that's a policy decision that the board is ultimately elected to try and make. This also is a policy decision. We're obviously spending money, we're spending resources of staff time on something that is not mandated for us to do. And it's no different than any other program that county has that we have to look at it. We could keep it in place. We could continue to do what we've always done. To me, that wasn't what I was asked to do by past boards and the current board. And so to me, it's a discussion. It's a discussion that has to happen. And ultimately, at the end of the day, 18 board members have to make a decision. Do we change policy direction or do we not change policy direction? And to me, the 18 board members have to hear from all the different townships. They have to hear the positives and negatives of making a policy decision. But ultimately, if there is a policy decision change that has to be made, it's in the best interest of all the residents of the county. I mean, we represent all the residents of the county in some shape or form, and we certainly don't want to screw any particular township, and we don't want to screw the residents in those townships. And so it's trying to, if we are going to make a policy change, which I think is the decision that really has got to be made, do we continue to go down this road as a policy change? Then fine, let's have a discussion and find out what works best for everyone. And then go down that road, whatever that is. It may not be this program, it may be a deviation of this program, but whatever it is, that's, we got to work together in concert in order for that to happen and be achieved.
Agree. I agree with everything you said, and that's why we're here today, to make sure that the lines of communication are open, stay open for a while. I just wanted to make one other comment that for a while there was a program, and I think Mr. Kopolsky knows this, that we just did maintenance on bridges. If they needed a beam or whatever was necessary just to maintain them, the county was giving us 2/3 of that project, and the township would pay the third, and we would do the engineering and stuff. And that program went away, obviously, when the standards, from IDOT and the feds went up, so that we could not do that any longer. So my point is, we did have a program in place that was working like that we could prolong the life of bridges 30 years, possibly even longer sometimes, without doing the complete reconstruction of the bridge, the $1.5 million or $1 million. As cheap as, so townships are capable of doing this, but since they took that program away, now you're asking us to go back to a $2 million program that there's no way that we're ready for that at this point, not with our levies. So agree with you 100%, but how do we get this program going without taking every bit of money that the townships have, the roads, something's gonna have to suffer in order to get this program initiated. That's my point, but I agree with you 100%, yes. Probably changes are coming, we just maybe won't be able to adapt to them right away. It'll have to be something that is a long term, and through discussions we figure this out.
So right now, we have 2 bridges in the system that we're currently working on.
No, we have 10 township bridges. We're currently-
10, but of those 10, they're at a certain phase. But you're saying there's 2 that we're going to finish this year?
No, well, there's 2 additional bridges that are in our 5-year program, scheduled to start engineering in 25 and 26.
Okay.
So those are the 2 I talked about earlier.
I wanted to clarify that too, because that
That's
kind of
perfect.
confused me.
Correct. The 10 are either somewhere in phase 1 or they're in phase 2 engineering. Those are the 10. So they're in process already. And those are 100% funded by the county, and they'll continue to be until they're constructed.
But 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, right.
They're at various stages. Some, you guys just approved the phase 2 engineering. Those are closer to completion. Grant Road last month, it's just starting phase 1.
And I'm just thinking out loud here, guys. That's when the future meetings need to happen. But I'm just thinking out loud, if we were able to overcome the funding issue, and you talked about possibly more bridges entered into the system, how many bridges could we feasibly, let's say we paid for all of it and we had the engineering, how many bridges could we bring into the system every year?
That's a budgetary question.
Well, I'm asking that question.
Everything is
The average bridge cost the county
$3 million
$3 million
for construction, right?
For construction, but our share of it
It's 20%.
is 20% of that, so.
But you don't see that right away. Like, for us, it'd be the ramping up from the engineering side, which we're seeing $300,000 to $400,000 engineering contracts. The big thing to me is how much Fed money are we gonna be able to get? Right now, IDOT is telling us they are FY '24 for them, funding year '24, is indeterminate of how much bridge money they can discretionarily apply to us. For Graff Road, we asked, they said, we can't fund it. And I asked again, I said, can you just do engineering in this fiscal year? Yeah, I think we can scrounge up just that. So they were only able to commit to the Fed funding for the engineering for the one project in their fiscal year '24. So looking at these models, how many bridges could we pull in if the townships were to lead and we were to be an economic, driver for them? We could be looking at 100% county money to pay for the engineering if there's no Fed money.
But there's no money.
And then the other point with that is this funding type, we have to front the entire cost and then get reimbursed. So when you're talking budget, when we develop budget, we have to factor in that initial whole 100% cost.
Of the engineering.
Right.
Yeah, to put that in perspective, let's say 10 township bridges came forward next year, 25. They wanted to start phase 1 engineering. That's $5 million, right? 500,000 times 10. So our budget's 50 million. a year. Could we find 5 million if that was a priority for the townships and we were the funding agency? Probably. We'd have to draw on our fund balances, but the motor fuel tax increase helps. I mean, we might have some additional funding available for stuff like that. And that's 10, that's not even the 25, but that's 10 of the 25 we could do in a year, maybe, right? But again, that's just us being a checkbook.
And let's not look at that $50 million though either, because that's the Randall Road project. 50 million doesn't happen overnight. We had to save years to get the money to do that project. And if you initially, when Randall Road was done, the cost with it, we didn't have the money. That's why there's two sections, the north section and the south section, because we didn't have the money to do the project.
I don't think our motoring public would have put up with the whole damn thing being done at one time if we had the money.
I do think one of the reasons on this discussion to come publicly at this point is, it's levy time. And gives you guys a little bit of a heads up that it's being discussed. So on your levies, that gives you, instead of possibly flat and cutting your levy, as the pressures are there, that maybe you would consider increasing your levies just to plan for the future here and on the road and bridge. And of course, you're probably going to maximum anyway because of inflation.
Right.
Mike.
So Don, real quick, I thought there was McHenry County judicial decision that was made that doesn't go to the board, that you have the autonomy to do what you want to do with your funds.
That is true.
Okay.
That is true, but you still got to get along with your board, so.
Oh, no, I get it. I'm just, you made the comment that the board has to approve it, and I
Yes,
thought.
they do have to approve it, but they don't have a choice. They have to approve it.
Okay, got it.
But in civil terms, yeah, you would like to have your board approve it in a nice way instead of controversial, okay?
And there's quite the battle.
Has that ever happened before?
Okay. Anybody else? Mike?
Well, I mean, I don't know where you were going to go with this, but I think for me, the decision is policy. Does this committee feel like this should be explored further? I mean, if the majority of the committee says, no, this shouldn't be explored further, we're not interested even having a discussion about a policy change, then I don't want to waste staff time, I don't want to waste the supervisor's time, or the road commissioner's time, with this. I mean, to me, I feel like there should be a policy. What that looks like, I don't really know yet, but I'm interested in going down that road and trying to figure out if there is some means by which we can get to the end.
So the problem is, how long do we explore a policy change? But go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I do believe that we need to have a policy change overall, but I think that we need to really start with this management question. Before we get to the other question, which is really the financing and the mode that's going to be the best to apply, I think we really need to look at this management. How can we, I mean, the bottleneck is the bottleneck. Their limitations are their limitations in terms of financing. So let's see how we can address the bottleneck itself and to share some of these responsibilities for the engineering, the oversight, the assistance with a grant application, et cetera. And so I think that's what I would like to discover more.
Okay, I'll move to John Reiner next.
The only thing I can see is you have some really small or low population townships with many bridges. So you would feasibly be putting that burden on, such a small population with the same need that Nunda needs for their bridges. And to put that on them, I don't think is realistic. And if that were to happen, and on some of these townships, could they even manage that kind of project without wasting or losing all the taxpayers' money I don't know, I mean, I could certainly entertain the conversation, but the chance of really ruining the system is great. I'm really concerned about that.
I think that's the point, though. We've got to look at how we might address that.
I'll open
And
for the
maybe-
discussion, though.
And maybe some of the smaller townships that don't have the capacity, that's not gonna happen. We may have to assume that responsibility, but there may be others who could assist with that responsibility and that management oversight. So I think that we really need to look at that and see what some alternative methodologies might be to address that issue. Let's look at that first and find out where we go from there.
So Dr. Sagar, we applied to that point. We saw this management bottleneck that you talk about. We applied for a federal grant, the Bridge Improvement Program, that was looking for a way to fund basically a township bridge manager. We have an extension of our design staff already, and so we took that same model and thought if we could get federal money for this extra position, that they could lead just the township structures. That could be a way to siphon off the burden to the county staff, even through the extension of our current consultant that works with us, and move it into this one single pot as a way. And we were not successful. And we had a debrief with FHWA, USDOT, and they said it really wouldn't have been applicable for that grant program anyway. But
We're thinking about
we're thinking about ways to do that, to help with the staff. And to your point, that's at least a starting point of a way to move the township burden.
Because we do have new board members here, what Daryl's talking about when he says we have staff to supplement that, we've got what they call a various contract that is already helping us move our county projects through the process. And that's to the tune of $300,000 a year. We also have another separate one that was approved by the board that is $300,000 a year too, that is helping us with construction. So this, should the committee decide to go with it, that could be a model that could be implemented for the township bridges, where we do hire a firm that would oversee the program in its entirety.
A one-stop shop. I
Yeah.
can see it.
Yeah.
I can see that.
I think that's what I'm looking for, I think, is an evaluation of those types of things. Presentations, what are the options? How do we do that? How do we move from where we are today with this bottleneck, maybe that's not the right term, but how do we move today from where we are to being more efficient overall for both units of government?
And I would agree with everything that everyone's saying here. But it has to be in our model, a coordination and maybe a cost share of that person is an option also between the townships helping to supply that person as their organization, and where maybe we did more of the funding of the actual projects.
I agree, but I think we have to
But
define
those
the
options,
question. That's where we start with the
they
first part.
all have to be discussed. Now, where do we go from here? Do we want to throw this on our agenda next month? Do we want to have a special meeting with the whole group just to hammer it
When
out?
we did the UDO, we had some special meetings,
Yeah,
Some,
so.
yeah, we had a lot.
right, 59?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot. So the question is where do you want to go here, folks? Do you want to go call a special meeting, first of all, with including all the road commissioners and all of this committee? Do you want to take it to the board full to ask them a question, whether the board would have a big enough appetite to even tackle this? Or just,
Maybe we could, on our level, do one meeting and then take it to the board and see how it goes further. Because we don't have enough information to share with them, do we?
I don't believe so.
I think we need to invite all of the road commissioners from all of the townships
Right,
to a special meeting.
okay.
And we did we sent an invite to all the commissioners about this meeting today, so
It was a little,
they're aware.
they couldn't make it here, most of them, because of just the timing that went out yesterday afternoon.
And it
And,
but it was a matter of making them aware this was a discussion point today. So
right,
it shouldn't be a surprise. is
Well,
what
they can watch the video if they want.
well,
Anyways, I agree. I think we should set up a meeting that's convenient for them, and if that's a night meeting, if that works best for them, then so be it, have it be a night meeting. But I think it's key to have them there, so.
This way, when we take it to the board, Brian, we have something to tell them, you know. like
Well, I don't
now.
disagree.
Oh, no, I know you don't, but I mean, just opening the conversation.
But I do believe, though, that we can get lost in the funding aspect of things. I think that's where we're really gonna get bottlenecked and tied up is with that, because we all know that that's the crux. Money is the crux of all evils, right? So that's where we're gonna find our issues. I think we need to have a solid understanding of management options, opportunities for us to address that element first. And then we talk about, okay, how do we share this and what are going to be those costs after that? I don't disagree that there should be some cost sharing here, but I think that we've got to start with that management element. And I think to accomplish that, I would suggest that we turn it over to staff for a little bit more of a discussion with that regards. And I know that we're talking about the levies and all this kind of stuff, and I know that there's a time element here, but I think we need to start there. I think we have another conversation here among this committee about that management element to get us a better foundation about what options are, and then move forward with costs and sharing and that type of thing.
all right, and totally agree on that. I'm gonna share one of my points, and it may be totally wrong, on the bottleneck situation, but I fall back on, I don't believe our federal funding long-term is going to be there. I think our country is at a breaking point with all the bullshit, excuse my language, going on around our federal government right now. And that someplace, something's gotta give. And the townships are an easy one for them to let go on their funding on that. And so the point I'm trying to make here in short is if we could reduce that bottleneck somehow to get more of these bridges in sooner, that would be, to me, the best thing we could do for everybody, except for possibly our budget constraints. So we'd have to make sure we could handle that budget scenario. We did address that with a motor fuel tax a little bit. There is extra funds coming in from that we could utilize on this. And I think we need to wrap this part up of the discussion.
I think the question is staff willing to do that? Do you have the time and capacity to evaluate this some
We've
more?
been working on this for 4 years, we can work on it some more. That's something.
Well, you heard a lot of feedback from, you've always asked what everybody, some of us thought. And so now we've expanded that today.
Yeah, and yes, we'll do whatever this committee wants. Understand, this conversation did not start with staff.
Right.
I
Can I
like
just
it.
interject one thing, Mr. Chairman, just one thing, and then I'll.
Did you just throw me under the bus? Is that what that was?
That's what that was.
No, I gotta be clear. It didn't start with us. It started with Sal over there. He's the one that did.
But we'll continue to go through this, and, I see where the discussion is potentially going with this. We can come up with options, but it's still gonna end up as a policy.
Yeah, and
Discussion, that's where this is all.
But there's,
no question.
yeah, I agree. It will end up as a policy one way or the other, but I believe it'll probably look totally different than what we just saw this morning. So, okay. But you gotta start somewhere, and I appreciate all the work you guys have put into this. So with that, I'm gonna close this conversation
Sounds good.
on this, because we gotta get going.
Okay, Joe's backing up the bus. He's gonna run over me again.
Thanks for coming, guys. And feel free to communicate with us
You know,
all.
and the bottleneck thing is like, you know, if we could find a way to get these done quicker, why there
we
is
got enough
federal
here.
money. I've never seen that with 10 years.
Okay. Mr. Kaminsky has to leave the meeting.
You want a motion to adjourn?
No. Do you have any staff report that you need to do?
No staff report.
All right.
you need a
Then
motion to adjourn?
No, we do have a need for executive session for land acquisition and litigation.
Not just land acquisition.
Just land acquisition.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session for land acquisition.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. favor?
Aye.
Okay, we gotta go back into, switch over,
I'll make
go
a
back.
motion to go into open session.
I'll second.
Second by Tracy Van Bergen. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, and we gotta shut down your
We
recording.
need a roll call or?
Should do a roll call as to who's here now.
We're a short one, but,
Can we go back if we're sure?
yeah, we can go back. We're not sure.
No, we have 5.
Okay, Mr. Sager, roll call, Mr. Sager.
Here.
Mr. Tire Track.
I'm here.
Mr. Reiner.
Reiner here.
Ms. Van Bergen.
Here.
Mr. Kearns is here. We're back in session.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good meeting today.